The What to Read Next podcast helps you build a TBR of future favorite books. In each episode, Lori and Maine interviews authors and book influencers to recommend books they loved for you to pick up today. If you're an avid reader, always looking for your next great read, then the show's for you. Hi, Becky. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be back.
I'm so excited to have you back. Tell us what you've been up to.
Nothing much. No, but I mean, like, just doing the podcast, reading, that's about it. I'm not working as I'm a non-working writer and actor at the moment. So it's like, that's how I'm answering everyone's questions of like, what do you do? So just a lot of reading. Yeah.
You're in a period of unemployment, which I would say those are the best periods of time where it's just, where creative strikes, where you're just taking a self-rest, reset,
Yes, I am doing a reset. It's like, it's nice, but at the same time, it's also like, you could get into those spirals of like, oh my God, what if nothing ever happens to me? I'm stuck here. Like, am I going to have to move? All that stuff.
Yeah, I've been there. I did it. I don't think I mentioned this, but about 10 years ago, I left the career that I thought I was gonna die in it,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and I became a professional temp. And so by that, I mean, I went through bouts of unemployment. I called them unemployment. I went because I quit jobs for no reason. Like, I was like, oh, I don't like to do this, I'll quit it.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
like this
Yeah.
person, I quit it. Like, it was like one of those things where, and so I remember like I'm like, I have anxiety. So like, taking that leap over and over and over show me that no matter what, you're going to be fine. No matter what, like whatever decision you make, it's just a redirection and it's going to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that those periods of time, those empty periods where there was like nothing, and there would be months where I was like, no work, were
Yeah. Yeah.
the most creative, fulfilling period of time at the same time. They allow me to try different things. They allow me to experiment. They allow me to get to know other people and like try on different communities and like put myself out there. And
Mm-hmm.
so I miss those periods, and like I am working towards retirement, in that
Yeah.
sense.
Uh-huh. Oh
because
yeah. I'm so excited for retirement.
because I'm like, what is going on? Like, we're
Oh,
not
100%.
we're not meant to work all the time.
I don't think so. Like, and it's weird because it's like you're thinking like, oh, what is my life outside of a work? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you do, like what am I doing? Like,
And they were
who
like,
am I?
and like the beauty of it is like I don't identify. I have a day job. I have a day job, and
Yeah.
so because for the listeners out there, we actually are part of a podcast group and group that we chat on a regular basis. So I actually don't identify with my day job. I don't
Right.
think I don't talk about it. Like, this is what I do. It's a fun day job. I'm not gonna
Hmm.
say it's a fun one. But I, because of that period of time where I spend not attached to a job, not attached to a career, it allowed me to create an identity outside of it. Have I
Yeah.
taken it to like, oh, I'm a podcaster, I'm a blogger, or I'm this? And yeah, those are things that I do, but they're not who I am as a person. They're just like, what I do, like how I spend my time,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's so crazy. And so yeah, so it's like this is a wild time because I am doing a lot of not like thinking. Well,
Yeah.
analyzing and like, journaling and like things
Yeah.
like that. And so it's like a great time, but at the same time it's also a scary time, and it's also like how like when it's like, why do I need to define myself at the same time as well? It's like, okay, I'm a podcaster, writer, performer, like, but that's not like everything. It's like I'm just human. Like when someone
Yeah.
asks what I am, I'm just like, I'm a human. I'm a human
I'm a
being.
human. I'm a
Yeah.
human. I have multiple, multi-passionate,
Hmm.
multi-creative. I try different things. I get out of their comfort
Exactly.
zone. It's not your job, it's your identity. I think we just need to shift that identity. Like, what do you
Hmm.
do? Like, it's such a like I thought it was a New York thing, but I feel like it's an LA thing. Like, what do
Oh
you
yeah.
do? And then like, what's your side hustle? What is your extra side hustle? The
Yeah.
expectation
Yeah.
to have multiple things in the cook, like to get
Hmm.
that going.
Oh, totally. Like it's the worst when like in LA, like, when someone's like, "Oh, what do?" usually talk for like 5 minutes about everything that you do,
Yeah.
and then, but like anywhere else where it's like, what do you do? And then like no one understands why you're talking for 5 minutes,
Yeah.
of like, wait, so but what do you do? And you're like, oh, I walk dogs, then I do this and I do that, but I really want to
Yeah.
do this. But sometimes I do that. And they're just like, I don't want to talk to you for that long, lady. Get out of here.
It is all good. It is all good. So
Hmm.
just enjoy it and
Okay.
just enjoy the period of it. So
Yeah. Thank you. No,
um
it's good to be reminded of that. And I appreciate that. And by coming on here, I'm enjoying it. I'm very excited to be back.
yes, and the fact that we can do this in the middle of the day, you know,
Isn't it wild? It's 11 o'clock for me, which is like, whoa, yeah, this is
and
great.
it's a 2 o'clock for me, and it's great. And I have the
Hmm.
flexibility to do this, and like that's I work really hard to get to that flexibility to get to this
Sure.
day. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, so let's chat it. So you've been reading, and
Hmm.
this is the end of the year episode. So for those listeners, we're recording in November 29th. So there's probably a month left, but we're gonna count like Goodreads where it ends between November to November or January to November for best of 2022. So far, what have you been reading? What kind of books have you been diving into?
So lately, I this is so crazy, but I recently, like a month or so ago, watched the show called Game of Thrones, which I hadn't seen in a while, or in a while ever. I hadn't seen. I heard of this show called Game of Thrones, watched
Yeah.
it, and so now I'm like fantasy romance all the way, like So, I've been reading Beck McMaster's oh gosh, I never know the titles, but it's like she's a thief. Oh, Thief of Souls. Yeah.
Ooh.
It's very good. It's the main character is like it's a female. The female is very like I think like she's very flawed, which I like. And she's well, because she's a thief, and not that being a thief is a flaw, but you have some flaws if you're stealing stuff. And so I'm really, really enjoying it right now.
I love this. And
Mhm.
so, an estimate, how many books have you read this year?
This is I didn't realize, and you could be like, Becky, like, what era are you living in? I didn't realize people count, first of all. Like I did. um, so I was like, okay, well, I read at least two a month, for the podcast, but I obviously read two a week for my life.
Mhm.
I think, but I didn't keep count. Um, And then also listening to books, which I didn't count. I think like I'm gonna say between like 70 and 100. But and
That's
I know that's a big thing, but I just didn't count. So my New Year's resolution is to count. I'm gonna count how many books.
So there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it on
Hmm.
Goodreads. You can add it it'll do automatically in the challenge.
Hmm.
You can keep a reading tracker. I have an Airtable. I have a spreadsheet. I
Oh,
track of my reading. I have like
such a good idea.
how many Kindle Unlimited. I can send you my spreadsheet. So it's like you fill the form. Takes you like 2 minutes to fill the form, but you can track how many Kindle Unlimiteds, how many hours you spend, like where
Hmm.
did you get it? Did you get it from the library? Like all those different data points. I like Goodreads. I spend with Goodreads for about I would say since 2016 all the way to 2021. And then
Hmm.
I keep Goodreads in a spreadsheet in 2021 because I was like, well, I would like to have more data points. I also, thanks to the day job, I've become more professional at Excel. So I
Yeah.
like data, you know?
No, it's great. And I'm like, I have my Goodreads, but then sometimes I'm like, I will like if someone gives you an arc or something or a
Yeah.
paperback, I'll completely forget that I won't write it down or I won't add it, and I'll be like, because I can look at my Goodreads and I can look at my Kindle, but then it's like, well, there's so many other books that like
Yeah.
someone gave me a
Or the
copy of, and I'm like,
audiobooks. Or,
or audiobooks. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like audiobooks, obviously, I feel like there are people who are like, that's not reading. It is
it
reading,
is
I know.
reading.
And so what, but then it's like you can't keep track of it. I don't I haven't been keeping track of it via Goodreads. So I'm just like, again, like I could be like it could be like 200 books and I didn't realize it.
It's a wild, wild west.
Yeah, just the wow of my brain of
It
just like
is
how
okay.
disorganized. Yeah.
It depends. It's up to you. Like honestly, sometimes it can be really triggering to have a number like
Hmm.
to know the number. For me, it's like gold stars. I track it because I get a gold star every single time I finish a book. Like that's just
Hmm.
kind of like that match my anxiety. But other people that creates more anxiety to just track it. So it
Hmm.
is okay. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be like, it is
I
fine.
agree. Because I think there are a lot of people, and I include myself in that, is just they always give themselves a hard time about reading. Like there's so
Mhm.
many people who are like, I don't have time to read books, or it takes me so long to read a book, and you feel bad about it. And it's like, reason to feel bad. There's no like, we don't have this English teacher standing over our shoulders all the time
Yeah.
being like, read this amount of books or else you're done, like,
Yeah.
and so I totally like understand the need to like be like, okay, I don't need to keep track and
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah. And you don't have to review every single book that you read. And nobody,
Hmm.
I think like you can do whatever you want. Like your reading
Yeah.
experience is up to you.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. It's not school, people. It's
It
not
is
school.
it's not school. Even the publishers are not grading you for
Yeah.
reviewing books.
Oh, I hope not. Because I'm like, all of
Yeah.
them. I like the part where they have sex. And they're like, who is this dummy reviewing?
The spicy was really good. This book had
Hmm.
mentioned cock and pussy, so we're happy with it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I was like, this has everything I needed,
Yeah.
and they're like, thank you for sharing the blank, like just the bare minimum of like what this book is.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, so let's chat some books. Okay. So what has been the top favorite book or favorite books for this year that you
This year I did get into monster romance and alien romance. I did read The Librarian and the Orc, which I still talk about. I read it for the podcast, but I also like I think it's like one of the top books because like I feel like um it it had so much stuff that I didn't like in a romance, but that I loved at the same time. Like it wasn't like to me it wasn't sexy, but I also well, it was sexy. I don't know. See, this is the point, is that it makes me think. You know what I mean? Like there's so much stuff in those books where it's like things are so subverted, and to some people there's like, oh, there's so many fluids and that's so gross, but then it's like, is it gross, and what do I think is gross, and like, so it's like I think it's like monster romances that I think have been like making me question like sexual standards of society. And also it's like people having sex, like don't get me wrong, there's like hot sex and cock and pussies, but like, it also like gets me in my head of like what is sexy, and like what is patriarchy, and I just love it. That's just like been my hobby of the year, has been like really dissecting alien and monster romances.
All right, so as a newbie starting out for Alien
Mhm.
Monster Romances, what do you recommend for me to pick up?
I would say Ruby Dixon. I mean, I think that's probably going to be an answer to a lot of or I feel like that's going to probably be a lot of people's answers because I think like it's been so popular. It's on TikTok. There's seen an article about it, like all that stuff. But I feel like if you really want to get in, let me look up her name. But if you really want to get into like, oh, what is monster romance? Like, let me like really dissect it. I think the Finley Fenn's books are key. They're longer, I will say, but they're dense. It really holds your hand as you like kind of as you because like I feel like when people are like monster romance, oh my god, like it's fucking an orc, that's insane. But it's like, and it's scary. It's scary to think about when you're like opening this book for the first time. But I feel like she really holds your hand and is like, this is get ready. I got you. Don't worry. This is scary, but it's sexy scary.
Okay, yes, I love this. Any other standout books or any other genres? So you're just like, okay, these were standout books to read, or from the podcast, or like, these were great episodes to listen.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like standouts for me, I read Rachel Grant's The Fiona Carver series, which is a duology, which I loved. And Tony Anderson, who's also my favorite author, had a new book out too in the Cold Justice series. So I loved those. And then I did read this is an older series. I think it like the last book was in 2019, but it's the Vengeance series by Kayla Cross, which I've been enjoying so much. It's like a romantic suspense series, and it's like about these female assassins who are all being targeted, and they all have to like work together to like stop these. But then, there's like a sexy like FBI agent by their side, but like they're so badass and they're all like friends, and they're like, they there's a sisterhood there in each book. And it's just, I've been really, really digging those.
Those are sound so good. I think those are probably going to be my introduction and then go to the monster. I kind of have to play around
Mhm.
with it, you know. I've
Oh
done
yeah.
my fair share of Ruby Dixon and they're great. They're easy
Hmm.
to consume.
Yeah.
But I think I've heard Family Fan, I've heard like the Sienna Costa, and I'm
Mhm.
like, they sound great on paper, but I'm still like afraid to jump into the pool.
Which I get. And like as I was like reading it, it like there were parts that like made me uncomfortable. And it wasn't until the end, those
Mhm.
books where it's like at the end, you're like, this was the most brilliant thing I've ever read. And
Yeah,
like that's how I view like Root v. Dixon, and like this book is like,
yeah,
this is uncomfortable. Like, oh my God, am I into bestiality? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just like,
yeah.
whatever. And then it's like, this was fucking brilliant.
All right, so we also got to talk about some disappointments, and we don't have to dive into a lot, but maybe like one or two disappointments, or one disappointment that you're just like, was a miss for me, but it can be a hit for you. You just
Hmm.
never know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay. So back a few months ago, there was like this like funny thing going around of the Conquered by Clippy was a like funny erotica that was like going around on like screenwriter Twitter, and they thought it was so funny. And I have a friend who's a TV writer, and he contacted me and he was like, have you read this? And I was like, no. And he's like, can I come on the show and review this with you? And I was like, sure. Um, because obviously I have to read a thing called Conquered by Clippy. Um, and the thing is that I read anything. I love everything. Like, but I was disappointed because like the I wanted clippy erotica. Like it wasn't sexy enough. And I'm saying this as someone who wrote this. Like I know this person wrote it as a prank. And like it was a joke with them and their friends. Doesn't matter. I was very disappointed because I wanted hornier. I needed hornier dialogue and explanations in this book, and it didn't deliver. And great premise, bad execution. Sorry, but that was my biggest disappointment. Yes.
I love how it came from screenwriters Twitter, you know.
Hmm.
Like it
Oh
did not
yeah, yeah,
come from the
yeah.
wrong plan. Yeah, this is like from another cold culture, you know.
Yeah, it's like another like writing culture. Like, and I will say it is like, predominantly men,
Mm.
like who are still kind of like, they're like, oh yeah, like getting around to like, oh, there's romance. Oh, like, oh, sex. People write about sex, and it's like you write about sex, except you put it on TV, and then
Yeah.
it's like, oh wait, like they're now getting around to the idea that there's also romance novels out there. And so it's like it was like they're like two steps behind. And it's like when my friend like contacted me about Conquered by Clippy, and I was just like, yeah, I've read so much crazier shit. Like, haven't you heard of Chuck Tingle? Like all this stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, not everyone is in like romance landia world like we are. Like,
Yeah. I love this. All right, so let's talk about 2023. So, what are you anticipating reading? You know.
Um, well, Rachel Grant and Tony Anderson are coming out with new books, which I'm excited about. I do want to kind of explore this fantasy romance more,
Mhm.
and kind of like really like I just was never something that was like I was into because I thought it was so confusing. But
Mhm.
now it's like, oh, okay, I'm ready for it. I do want to read more monster romance.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think the authors that I'm looking forward to are Rachel Grant and Tony Anderson. I mean, every year they're just like I stalk them like they're my best friends, and they don't know me at all. And but I just like love their books. They both are coming out with like new series that's like it's part of their series, but it's like a what is it when it's like
Like
a
a spin-off?
a spin-off of a series. Yes, they have spin-off series. Both of them are coming out with new spin-off series, which I'm very excited about because it's always exciting when that happens. And it's like, oh, okay. I love when your favorite authors do that. So it's
I love
exciting.
this. And have you read ACOTAR? Now that I have to ask that, it's popular in TikTok, it's popular everywhere.
Mm-mm.
Fantasy
No,
romance. All right,
I
so
haven't.
I would say the first book is kind of like very, very slow. The first book, the first half of the
Wait,
book,
what's the first book?
a Court of Thorns and Roses.
Okay, I did start it and I could not. It was so slow.
It's
I couldn't
really
finish
slow.
it.
So just
Yeah.
ignore it. I would say like if you're reading a Kindle, just look for the mountain and get to the mountain because the first part is just like painting and just like just chilling in that house. And I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
freaking care about this.
I was so bored.
But the
So bored.
second book is so good. Like you have to get
Okay.
to the second book. The second book is
Mhm.
like the best. The third book
Okay.
is fine, but the second book is like you're like, what just happened here? And it's
Okay.
so good. So by far, it's like it's worthwhile just to slog through the first half. If you just like skip to the mountain, you do need to know about the mountain because it does
Okay.
show up in the second book.
Mhm.
But the mountain is like when things pick up, and so
Okay.
things happen in the mountain and they're like, so
Listen, if years ago I tried to watch Game of Thrones, couldn't get through it. I did
yeah,
it recently, and I feel like if I can do that, then I will definitely pick up
yeah,
A Court of Thorn and Roses again. I will try. I am
yeah.
making this vow on this podcast. You can hold me to it.
Just let me know once you get to Court of Mystery, or once you get to the mountain, then you're just gonna
Mhm.
be like, okay, I got to the
Okay.
mountain. Now what? you know,
Okay, just get to the like, I love that. It's also like a good like life lesson of just like just get to the mountain, man. Just
just
keep
get to the
going.
mountain.
Get to that mountain. I don't know what it means, but just keep going and get to that mountain.
Yeah. Once you get there, it picks up, and then you're just like ready to go for the next book. I read
Okay.
those two books back to back, and then I had to wait for the third book. And so I
Mhm.
think my experience was like not as good for the third book. It was just like there was a cliffhanger in the second book, so you're like, oh my god, I need the third book right away. I was like annoyed
Yeah.
that I had to wait for it. I
Yeah.
would say for her books, that's probably the worthwhile reading because Throne of Glass is very long and it's very
Mhm.
tedious, and you
Mhm.
have to go through different character arcs and different things. Like I have not finished Throne of Glass. I started again, I try reread it again, and I'm stuck in book 5. I'm stuck in the same place that I got stuck like 4 or 5 years ago. So
Okay.
that
Yeah.
would say
Yeah.
like no. And then Crescent City is just really long and
Mhm.
like nothing happens. Like so
Yeah.
I would just, I think
Mhm.
don't hate me if you love Crescent City, good for you. I've not read the second book. I read the first one. It took me like about a year to read it. It's too long.
Mhm.
These books need an editor,
Yeah,
that's
and like that's the thing with like fantasy is that like my brain can only hold so much information.
yeah.
And listen, I'm reading these books like the love story is what I want,
Yeah.
like that's why
Yeah.
so it's like, oh, I love the idea of world building, and I think it's like I really respect writers who can come up with all these different like elements of the world, but if it's eclipsing the romance part of it, I'm just like
Yeah.
it's so hard for me to be invested.
Yeah, I need the romance. I need like the stuff. I like politics and the stuff, like how things
Yeah.
get around and stuff. Like I like
Mhm.
the politics a lot. And so, but I think when it's too much show and tell, like show me like brain down idea, like brain down of like blah blah blah, and this world did this, and this world. I'm
Mhm.
like I get bored.
Yeah.
I'm a plot driven person, so I need to
Mhm.
be moved by the plot. I cannot be a character study doesn't work for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
for
And
like
like
90%. Yeah.
yeah, for like and it's like side characters that
Yeah.
like I mean, for me it's like it's always about the two main characters because it is a romance or to however
Yeah.
many people are in this relationship. So when it's like a side character and it's like they die all of a sudden in like the third act and then the character like your main character is like really sad and you're like, "Oh fuck, I was not I'm sorry, I said fuck." You're like, "Oh no, like I wasn't invested and now this character's really sad and I didn't care about what the character cared about and I'm just a terrible reader." Like,
No, I really much. I'm like, unless there's a purpose behind a side character, I don't care about them unless there's a
mm,
purpose behind, unless they're doing something for
exactly.
it, And yeah, the death is like I hate when that happens because I'm like, no, I don't want them to be grieving. Like,
No,
I want
yeah.
them to already have grief. Like, most romance novels,
Mhm,
their parents already died or something like that. And so they
mhm.
already have gone through the major grieving process. I rather be like in this place where I'm like, I already have been grieving, and so here I am trying to build my new life. That's the character
Exactly.
that I like.
I agree because, like, I think I mean, again, there was a thing on yesterday on romance Twitter, which I am still going on, which I know I need to get off. I feel like I'm walking into a dumpster fire on Twitter, but like again, there was like the other like what does a happily ever after mean? Like, you know, versus like then versus now. And, you know, it's talking about like, you know, and so people were talking about optimism and like, you know, the romance novels are supposed to be like have a level of optimism no matter what that HEA is. And so I think like I love that optimism. And so seeing a character get their life together, like even the journey itself is optimistic. And I think that's why I like it too. You know, it's not necessarily like, oh, at the end their life is together, goodbye. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you see them putting the pieces together and working hard and failing and not believing in themselves and then believing in themselves, you know.
It's all good stuff. I
It's
love
all
this.
good stuff.
So we got a whole year ahead of more fantasy, more romantic suspense, more
Mm-hmm.
monster romance,
Mm-hmm.
and more
Yeah.
podcasts. So tell us about the
More podcasts.
podcast.
Yeah. So I host a podcast called Too Stupid to Live, of which you have been a guest, and I have so
Yeah,
much fun, and you're always welcome back. But it's a podcast that reviews romance novels $5 and under. The weirder the better. And I also have episodes called Hot as Hell with TSTL, where I talk with romance authors and other like people in the romance world, just about what they're working on. And yeah, that's pretty much TSTL in a nutshell.
I love this. And where can we find it?
Yeah, we can find it on Apple Podcasts and I was about to say Pandora. I don't know why. I meant Spotify. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and tstlpodcast.com.
Awesome. I'm Becky. Where can we connect with you?
I am on the social medias at Beckles212. And my podcast is on social media at TSTL Podcast.
Thank you, Becky, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For a list of books mentioned and other romance recommendations, please visit whattoreadnextblog.com. Did you know you can purchase audiobooks directly from your favorite local bookstore? With Libro.fm, you can pick up more than 250,000 audiobooks, including bestsellers and recommendations from real booksellers. You'll get the same audiobooks at the same price as the largest audiobook company, you know the name, but you'll be part of a different story, one that supports your local community. If you're new to audiobooks, there's a perfect way to squeeze into more reading into your busy life. Listen with the free Libro.fm app while you do your chores, walk your dog, relax at home. The Watch to Read Next podcast has a special offer for our listeners. Get 2 audiobooks on Libro.fm for the price of 1 with your first month of membership. Use code WhatToReadNext. This offer is only valid for new members in Canada and the US. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.